Hello and welcome. This yoga practice is a yin version of a sun salutation in that the postures will emulate some of the shapes that one makes during practicing a classical sun salutation, which is actually a yang practice. So there's some contrasting polarities here, some maybe even a bit of irony of taking a very yang, heated sun salutation and giving it a yin interpretation. The postures will include a supported bridge pose, which I call Milky Way Pose. So you'll need a prop for that to generate height, either a block or a bolster or books or whatever you have on hand. That's kind of the only required prop. Then there'll be Caterpillar Pose, which is a forward fold, Dragon Pose, Sphinx Pose, Puppy Dog Pose, Melting Heart Pose, and then the other side of Dragon Pose. And then we'll reflect back, so it's another round of Caterpillar Pose and another round of the supported bridge pose. So maybe find a prop for the supported bridge, maybe other props like padding. And the theme for class, of course, is this contrasting idea of yin and yang, in that they're not really opposites. They actually kind of merge together and dance with one another. Nothing is purely yin, nothing is purely yang. Since this is a fairly long sequence of 3-minute yin postures, we'll get started right away. But since sunset type salutations and this yin interpretation is a lot of forward and backward movement and postures, there's not a lot of twists or lateral bending. So we'll start off with a warm-up of just some simple seated twists. So come to a comfortable seat. It can be cross-legged like I'm sitting, or some other way that works for you. If this cross-legged seat doesn't work here, make sure it feels stable. And then grow some integrity up through your torso by bringing your spine to a nice and neutral spine. And then bring your hands, make sure you have space around your torso, hands on either side of your torso, and make a slow sweeping circle with your extended arms up towards the ceiling to feel like you're growing long through your arms and through your torso. You're kind of reaching up towards the ceiling. And then very gently, slowly lower your arms and begin to twist over to the right side, with your hands finally settling down onto the ground or onto something here. Spend a few breaths here. So grow this twist. Inhale and maybe grow a bit taller. Exhale and see if you can softly increase the twist. It may not happen. You might already be at a good edge, so then you just reside here. One more breath. And then bring yourself back to center. Same procedure. Start with your hands on either side and then make that big sweeping circle up towards the ceiling, and then reach up and then slowly lower the extended arms and twist over to the other side. And then stay here for a moment. So take some time to kind of maybe even wiggle around, see if you can create a little, find extra bits of space so that the twist can deepen. Again, we're not going for pain here, just kind of going for what feels like a twist in the torso. You can feel your breath here. Just notice for one more breath. And then bring yourself back to center. You can do a little bit of a counter twist if you want to. And then from here, we'll start the yin sun salutation. This is still a little bit of the warm-up in that we'll do a bit of a yang exercise here. I call this reclined mountain pose. So go ahead and lie on your back, legs extended. This kind of reminds me of shavasana or resting pose, but instead of taking a yin and restorative attitude, let's take a yang attitude with this. So you're lying on the floor, but instead of just lying limp on the floor and releasing everything like we do in shavasana, go ahead and flex your feet. Try to point the toes up towards the ceiling. There's a light toning and activation in the feet, in the legs, in the hips, in the torso. Arms are extended along your sides. Palms face towards your body here. And there's a little bit, there's just a tiny bit of light toning in your arms. And so you're lying here not relaxed, because there is some light toning. So you're taking a very kind of gentle yang attitude because the floor is supporting you. Maybe take a moment here to notice your breath. Notice the points of your body that are actually touching the floor. With things, with muscles slightly toning in your body, probably there's less touching the floor than when you're completely relaxed here. So you notice that your body's a little bit more active, a little bit more aware and awake here. And just a couple breaths here. This is kind of a yang exercise, so we don't stay here too long. And then you can go ahead and release. And now we'll start the first 3-minute yin posture, which is the supported bridge pose, where we'll stay for a few minutes. So this is where you need a prop. You can use a block or a couple blocks or a bolster. I'm going to demonstrate with a single block during this practice. I often use 2 blocks to do this pose, but I see most people just using one. One feels a little bit less stable to me than 2, but it's less block props that you have to juggle with here. So find your prop. It could be a pile of books too. Bend your knees, put your feet on the floor, and then lift your hips up high enough to put some height underneath it. Now, the block has different heights, so I can choose how high I set the block. But since we're going to do this posture twice, I'm going to set the block. I'm going to be extra gentle with myself on the first time. So I'm going to set the block on the low side here, underneath my low back, my pelvic bone. The flat, bony part that feels really stable here. That's where it needs to go, is where it feels stable, but not pinching or uncomfortable here. And you have some options here. If your prop is too high, make it lower. If your prop is too low, you can make it higher. So you're making this gentle bend. You can keep your knees bent and feet on the floor if this is what feels good to you. But if you want to get a kind of a stress on the fascia and the psoas complex, the big hip flexors that run along the front of the hip bone, then maybe try to straighten the legs out here. And you're making this, so notice you're making this gentle arch here. And this is where we'll stay. And then now we're in yin mode. So now it's relax the muscles, let time and gravity take over, and then stay a while. This is part of the 3 principles here. And so I'll go over the 3 principles. The first one is for a yin practice is find your edge. In other words, find your shape where you're reaching the limit of your range of motion, and so that you're starting to feel sensation here. And then cultivate a sense of patience and stillness and stay in the posture rather than jumping in and out. You can move, you can adjust the posture if it's getting too intense or not intense enough. You can always adjust your edge. And indeed, if you stay here for a long enough time, you might very well need to adjust your edge. I find myself doing this when I'm spending long times in yin postures. It's like I'm not completely still in that. Sometimes all sensation goes away and I want to move deeper into the posture, or sometimes it's too dramatic and I need to go less deep here. The idea is to just kind of stay and marinate here. This is kind of one of the first shapes that's emulating a shape in a classical yang sun salutation. So in some versions of sun salutations, you're standing. Maybe start standing in mountain pose. We did reclined mountain pose. And then you do it's often called an upward salute, where you raise your arms up overhead and you maybe do a little bit of a mini back bend. So this is the mini back bend going on. It's just not a standing yang back bend. It's a yin back bend because it's supported and we're staying here. We've got another little more than a minute to stay here. Notice if you need to adjust something. Maybe your block was too high Maybe it was too low, and so you can change it to a different height here. And so that's the idea behind this practice, is we're going to move through rough shapes and take on a yin mentality that would normally be associated with something that's very young, muscular, and heat building. So about three or four, maybe 4 more breaths here in this shape here. So this is basically a yin version of an upward salute. Although I call this bridge pose, I call it Milky Way Pose, because you're making this graceful arc like the arm of our Milky Way in a clear, dark night sky. Here. Just to remind you that you are made of stuff of the Milky Way. You're made of the stardust in our own galaxy here. Slowly start to come out of this. So if you had your legs extended, then bend your knees again, put your feet on the floor. Root and push through your feet and your shoulders enough so that you can reach and take your prop underneath, and then slowly lower everything down to the ground. A little bit of a counter pose before we move into the other posture, which is actually a forward fold, which is caterpillar. Before that, maybe waterfall. So bring your knees towards your chest and then extend your legs up towards the ceiling. Kind of make an L shape here. I call this waterfall pose here. You can just stay here, arms on either side, or you can clasp the backs of your thighs if that makes this feel a little bit more rooted. This is actually a motion that's found in a lot of sun salutations as well. It's a half forward fold, but it's upside down. Your spine is in a nice neutral position here. So one more breath here. And then you can go ahead and lower the legs. Gently roll over to one side. Bring yourself up to seated. The next yin posture is caterpillar pose, which is just a seated forward fold here. So you'll start with legs out in front. If you have a lot of tightness in your legs or your back body, maybe sitting up on some height. Again, it could be a bolster or a blanket. I'm going to use my handy dandy little block here. You're going to sit up on the block. Legs are extended. They don't have to be straight. In fact, you can put a prop underneath the knees to keep them bent so that they don't get overstrained. Here. Grow up tall through your torso for just a moment and then fold forward. Again, this is a yin posture. So at some point, relax the muscles in your torso. Let your spine just round until it stops, wherever that is, and then just kind of soften all the muscles. So since my legs are kind of externally rotated, if I release my muscles, they're going to kind of just fall out to the side. If that happens with you, that's okay. That means you're releasing the muscles here. If you're internally rotated, maybe your knees and your feet kind of roll together. Or maybe you're neither and your legs stay relatively straight here. So this is caterpillar. And again, you can put any kind of padding or support you need under your head or your torso here. And this is where we'll stay for another 3 minutes or so. So some alternatives. So this is a forward fold. So in a sun salutation, usually after the upward salute or the tiny back bend, then one folds all the way forward and is standing in. So this is the emulation of that forward fold here. Having said that though, if caterpillar is a posture that doesn't fit your body very well, some alternatives are this. You can do butterfly. Bend your knees, put the bottoms of your feet together. Bring your heels however close or far you want to from your hips to make this comfortable, and you can always prop your knees up. And then round forward into butterfly. Maybe this is more accessible for you. So give yourself permission. That's part of yin, is allowance and permission to make the changes and modifications that you need for this posture. That's something that's a little bit different than the strict traditional yang world, where you really are you're just trying to follow the leader here. But here, you're trying to follow yourself here. So this is one modification. Or, there's a yin posture that actually is really similar to the forward fold, and that's ragdoll. So if you really like ragdoll is a standing forward fold. So you can come into a real ragdoll if you actually prefer this over caterpillar. It's another version of a forward fold. And it actually does kind of look like the standing forward fold that one would actually move through in a vinyasa sun salutation. Otherwise, if you're okay in caterpillar, we'll kind of just hang out here for another minute. So again, I'm just pointing out to I'm making a very yang idea into giving it a yin interpretation by just finding yin postures that sort of emulate here. And there are some similarities and there are some differences. Just like in this concept of yin and yang. Yin and yang are not the Taoists who kind of thought a lot about yin and yang. They didn't consider them hard opposites that never crossed over and kind of messed or intermingled with the other. They were always intermingling, and it often depended on perspective, what was yin and what was yang. In fact, you could have two things in a certain perspective. One would be yin, the other would be yang, but in a different perspective, it would be reversed here. So maybe one more breath here in caterpillar, in this whatever forward fold that you chose here. And then if you were in caterpillar, maybe use your arms to bring yourself up, grow nice and long and tall here. And then slowly, maybe make any kind of little movements to work out any kinks from caterpillar. You might have to do a little bit of a back bend or a twist to work out the achiness in the spine after that long fold. And then we're moving into, we're emulating a classical sun salutation, which has low lunges in it. And the low lunge in yin is dragon pose. So make your way on hands and knees. Come to all fours. And then bring your left foot forward, inch your right knee back. Come into this low lunge. And then this is where we'll stay. This is dragon pose. You can put lots of padding underneath that back shin if you need to, if the knee or the ankle is sensitive. You can modify where this front left foot is. Maybe it has to go out a little bit. Maybe the toes have to turn out, or maybe they have to turn in. You can put your hands on the ground to kind of just help stabilize if they don't reach the ground. This is where you grab your block or your books here to put underneath your hands so that they're stable here. You can do a more yang-like version of dragon, like coming up here. This really does kind of emulate the low lunge in the classic sun salutation, but this is another good emulation. You can also come into low flying dragon, which is bring the left foot out and bring your forearms all the way to the ground or to blocks here. Otherwise, we'll stay here for a couple more minutes in dragon pose here. And again, just to remind, so if dragon is working for you, you can just stay here, kind of marinate, notice the sensations. If this doesn't work for you, remember there's inverted dragon. An inverted dragon is just making your way onto your back. Right leg's extended, left knee is in towards the torso. You can just hold on to the left knee, or you can come into a half happy baby version of inverted dragon. And maybe this is a better shape for here. This is close to a low lunge. It's just flipped upside down. So, and no posture is exactly the same. Each posture has a different intent, has a different orientation to gravity, and therefore it has a different effect on your body here, depending on if you have muscles engaged, if this were a yang practice, or if you're trying to soften the muscles in this yin practice and try to just get support through the bones and the connective tissue and just kind of hanging off the connective tissue itself here. In Dragon, for most of us, we kind of feel that tension running through the hips, this is considered a classic hip opener in Yin. It's also a classic hip opener in Yang too. You'll see a lot of people doing this in Yang practices, but more in a Yang fashion, where the movement is faster, the muscles are engaged. There's a lot more muscular toning here. There's a lot more time and patience and mental toning going on. So we can let this just soak in here. So maybe one more minute here in Dragon Pose here. And this is maybe a good time to start contemplating in your mind what you find to be contrasting polarities. What are things that are sun salutations in your life, the yang versions? What in your life is the yin? Or kind of yin activities. Maybe there are some activities that you don't quite know if you can quantify them as yin and yang. And those are the activities you maybe really need to think about. You don't have to fit them into a bin. That's the thing about yin and yang, is it's always dynamic, it's always in motion here. Even these long-held postures, there might not be a lot of physical movement going on, but you're still breathing, you're still thinking, you're still feeling, and those are dynamic, those are moving, those are flowing, even in the yin practice here. We're getting done with this, with Dragon. Maybe one more breath here. And then maybe a counter pose to Dragon is a yang posture, downward facing dog here. So maybe plant your hands, tuck the back toes, lift the back knee, press yourself backing up into downward facing dog here. You can take your dog for a walk. This is, again, a yang posture, so hands are planted, you can feet press towards the ground. And then make your way onto your hands and knees. Come into a forearm plank. So there's a little bit of a yang interlude here. So come down onto your elbows, hands are planted, and then extend one leg, press the toes into the ground. Extend the other leg, press the toes into the ground. Activate your core muscles, tone through your torso. And then just stay here for a moment. You can even move around. This is, after all, a yang pose here. So maybe one more breath here, and then gently lower yourself all the way onto your belly, legs extended out behind you. The next yin posture is Sphinx Pose here. So we're getting kind of to the center of the sun salutation here. We'll do the other side of Dragon a little bit later. A couple of symmetrical yin postures here. So set yourself up for Sphinx. We're coming back into yin mode here. Legs are extended comfortably behind you. Feet can be as close or as far apart as you would like them. Elbows are underneath your torso, under your shoulders, roughly shoulder width apart. Adjust so that you can put more body weight into the arm bones, the upper arm bones here. And then relax your torso to let your spine compress into a very light back bend here. And if this is too intense, you can just lay your head on your hands. If this is not intense enough, maybe get a couple of blocks, put each block under your elbow so that you're up a little bit higher. I'm going to suggest that just basic Sphinx here is fine, unless you have a really supple back and you need to go into an extreme back bend to feel something here. Again, you can keep your head up, you can let your head hang, you can put your head on a prop here. And we'll stay here in Sphinx for a couple more minutes or so. Doing any sort of a sun salutation kind of gets me in the mood of thinking about about the sun and the Earth's journey around the sun. So this video is being recorded right in the middle of high summertime, and it's during the long days and the hot days of summer that it's a good time to reflect on the sun here and to remember just how critical and important that major astronomical body is. That's our star. It's our personal star. It's the star that gives this planet and us life. And it's okay to remind ourselves of that. And the sun does a good job all on its own whenever we're outside, and we can feel that very caressing radiation from our own stars, and letting us know that it's there. So another maybe minute and a half here in Sphinx. And again, this is in our sun salutation here. So in a classical sun salutation, there's a posture known as Cobra Pose, which is a yang backbend. It's a prone backbend, just like Sphinx is, only there's a lot more muscle engagement in the torso and in the arms, and kind of can make it a whole body experience, the Cobra Pose. And Sphinx, of course, is the yin equivalent of Cobra Pose. Although, since Cobra is very yang and Sphinx is very yin, I would say that they're two very different postures that have very different qualities. Although, if you're just a casual observer staring at the pose, you would see that they're kind of similar in that they're both just these prone backbends here. So about 3 more breaths here in Sphinx. When you're ready to come out of Sphinx, I would recommend just making a pillow, one hand over the other hand, and just resting the side of your head onto that. Let your spine kind of neutralize and recover from the compression in Sphinx here. And then when you're ready, we'll move into the next yin posture, which is another type of a backbend. This is Melting Heart Pose, which the more common name for this shape is Puppy Pose. And so come to hands and knees. There's an alternative for this posture too. So if Melting Heart doesn't work for you, from hands and knees, go ahead and extend your arms forward and lower your sternum towards the floor. So initially this is a little bit yang in that you're kind of pressing through your hands and your arms to support your torso as it lowers here. Your lower body is stable. So shins, knees, hips, they're all feeling nice and stable here. And then once you get into this shape, then you soften and relax into Melting Heart. So initially it's kind of the yang puppy pose. And then for Melting Heart, you just slowly kind of let everything ooze and soften here. So maybe your forehead is on the floor, maybe your chin is on the floor. We have to wiggle around and adjust this. We're trying to set up traction in the upper body, in the shoulders, in the thoracic spine. That's kind of the physical intent of this posture. This is emulating downward facing dog, actually. So this is kind of the yin counter pose, the yin equivalent of the very yang half arm balance known as downward facing dog. Sometimes we use that as a counter pose, or I use it as a counter pose. But instead of just kind of moving through downward facing dog as one would in a yang sun salutation, we're staying here in puppy pose, we're staying here in Melting Heart for a while. However, some of us, this just doesn't fit us. So if you're fine here in Melting Heart, stay here for a couple more minutes. Otherwise, I'll demonstrate heart opening on a prop, which is kind of a nice alternative. You'll have to make your way onto your back, and you'll need a prop of some kind. Again, a block or a bolster or some books. you will lean back on and place the block underneath your upper spine. I always say just lean back, place the block right underneath your shoulder blades here. And I've got the block on the medium setting. That might be too high. And if it is, put the block on the lower setting if you have a block. You'll need something for your head. So maybe I'm grabbing this bolster just to prop my head up. And then legs can kind of do whatever they want to. So this pressurizes the upper back here, which is sort of what's going on in Melting Heart Pose. So this is a good alternative if for some reason Melting Heart doesn't work for you. So you can try this here. Otherwise, we'll stay whatever shape you found. We'll stay here for about another minute and a half. Again, this is kind of emulating the floor transitions. This in the sun salutation, where one moves through plank into cobra, and then back into downward facing dog. Here we're moving from forearm plank from Sphinx, and now we're in Melting Heart here for just a little less than a minute or so. So again, maybe take some time to take in your whole being. So in this posture practice, the physical being kind of grabs our attention first. But once we have a handle on what's going on physically in these postures, be they a yin practice or a yang practice, then you tap into maybe what's going on mentally and emotionally here. This is one of the powers of a yin practice. Sometimes yang practices get so fast moving and so intense that all we can do is concentrate on the physical part. We don't really have time to contemplate what else is going on. Well, you have plenty of time. You have plenty of time in this yin practice here. We have kind of out of time for this posture. So whatever version of Melting Heart you took, bring yourself slowly back up to hands and knees, and then just a short counter pose. We'll come into Child's Pose. So if you have your favorite version of Child's Pose, move into that. I'm moving into kind of just an extended arm, normal Child's Pose here, just for a couple breaths, just to counteract. For me, this is a forward bend, and it counteracts the back bend that I was doing in Melting Heart here. So maybe one more breath here. And then when you're ready, come up. And now we're starting kind of the other half of the sun salutation here. So the other side of Dragon Pose. So from hands and knees, bring the other foot up, so it would be the right foot this time. Left knee is back here. And then find your dragon shape here. So things can get adjusted. Props can be used here. And then when you find your version of dragon, stay here. Remember, you can do half happy baby on the other side with the left leg extended, right knee in here. And then we'll just stay here for a few moments. For a few minutes here in this side of a dragon. So give yourself time to settle in. That's what's great about yin, is you have time to figure out, to explore and figure out what your posture is here. And then you can settle. And then you can reside and marinate and soften. And notice how your being responds to this particular shape that you happen to be making here. So in the yang world, sun salutations are usually fiery, quick warm-up poses to build heat, to kind of work the muscles. And this The classical yin sun salutation that we're emulating in this yin sequence usually takes about a minute, maybe a slightly bit less than a minute to run through. So often you do several in a round to kind of really work the muscles and build up heat in a yang practice, in a yang setting. Here, this is going to take us about an hour to do this, maybe even a little bit more than an hour, to work through these slow yin versions of the posture. So that's how much we slowed down from a yang sun salutation. We've gone from a minute practice to an hour practice, just by switching modes, switching intentions from a yang intention to a yin one. So another minute here in Dragon Pose. Good time. So this this concept of yin and yang comes from China, comes from the kind of this Taoist philosophy in Asia, and this metaphorical symbology of the dragon plays heavily in that sort of tradition. So that's why this is called. That's why I use the term dragon for this posture. But you can give a posture any name you want to. There's other names for dragon. There's low lunge. The Sanskrit name from India is Anjaneyasana. I've heard this posture also called new moon pose, this low lunge here. So 4 more breaths here in dragon. And then when you're ready, come out of dragon slowly, bring yourself out. You can do downward facing dog again. Do some other kind of movement to work out kinks that started to arise here. And then when you're ready, we're moving back into another round of caterpillar pose. So caterpillar pose again, or ragdoll pose, or butterfly pose. Again, you're choosing your version of a forward fold. And I'm suggesting a seated forward fold. This time I'm going to sit up on not quite so much height, so I'm changing this posture myself. Instead of a block, I'm just going to sit up on a little bit of a blanket and do caterpillar this way. You can do butterfly, you can do ragdoll. Yeah, you're not stuck with a single posture here. And again, we're taking a yin attitude. So I can start out with my legs straight and a little bit of activation in my legs, but this is yang. This is staff pose, what I'm doing right now. A wonderful yoga posture, but I want this to be a yin practice, so I'm shifting my mental intention here in allowing things to soften. And so the knees are going to bend, the legs are going to kind of move where they want to. That's helping me know that I am actually softening and releasing muscle here. And if I need any support, I'll gladly grab it here and then just stay here. So a couple more minutes again here. This can be the exact same practice as you did at the beginning of practice, or it can be a totally different version of the posture that you practice here. It's up to you. This is maybe one thing that's a little bit different about a yin attitude. Give yourself permission to be more accepting and more allowing of what you need and what you can do, rather than deciding that you have to invoke some force upon yourself to do something that is not quite working for you here. And then just stay here. And just notice. So this is, again, in these forward folds, I'm really trying to soften and let my spine round. And I can use my breath to do that because my lungs are right there, right in front of my upper spine. And I can maybe use the inhales and the exhales to soften, expand here. I can even have time to contemplate about the sun. That was one of the energetic ideas of a sun salutation. The reason why they were called the sun is you were basically, a sun salute is to basically say, hi sun, I see you and I understand just how critical you are to to life, not just my life, but to life on this planet. And it's a very powerful act because it's acknowledging one of those very basic things that we can so easily take for granted. Which is why it's good yoga, because in these physical yoga practices, we're noticing our own bodies, which we can often too easily take for granted. Yeah. It's about 4 more breaths here. And then when you're feeling ready, slowly bring yourself out of your forward fold. A little bit of moving around here. I'm going to suggest a waterfall pose again for a counter pose, although you can certainly do something else if you need to work out the kinks. So make your way onto your back, knees into your chest first, and then extend your legs up into this lying L shape here. And again, hands can be behind your thighs or they can just be resting on the ground. This is a little bit of yang integrity in the legs, so you're kind of pressing your heels up towards the ceiling. Again, we're just here for a couple of breaths to kind of work out spine. Spine is relaxed in a nice neutral position to kind of work out the kinks of the forward fold. And then we'll go ahead and release. And we're coming back into the supported bridge pose again, the Milky Way pose. So get a hold of your prop again. And then the same procedure. Knees bent, feet on the floor. Lift your hips up and place the prop underneath your low back. I'm going to go a little bit higher this time. So I'm going to put the prop on the high side. Maybe you decide that lower is better for you, or maybe the same height that you used before. Again, choose which supported bridge you would like. Maybe knees stay bent, or maybe you can lengthen out the legs to kind of get this very gentle full body lengthening here. Again, this is the simulation of a slight back bend in an upward salute here. And then we'll stay here. So again, once you're here, even though this is emulating a sun salutation, this is actually a yin practice. So now you let gravity and time take over. And that's what we'll do here. For this final yang or yin lit movement here. We'll just stay. We'll stay here for a couple more minutes or so. Again, if you're finding things too strainful, come out, give yourself a break, or fire into lower setting with your prop. Make this your sun salutation. So maybe another minute here. That's okay. If it's not okay, then please come out and just rest for a while. Otherwise, notice your breath again. Notice the sensations here. When you're ready to come out, bend your knees, put your feet back onto the floor, root through the bottoms of your feet and your shoulders, and then lift your hips up just high enough so that you remove the prop, and then slowly with control, lower your torso all the way down to the floor here. We'll finish the sun salutation with this yang reclined mountain pose again. So extend both legs out long, feet flex, toes point up towards the ceiling, and a light toning throughout your legs, through your whole body, arms extended on either side. Again, hands facing the sides of your torso. And there's a little bit of, even though you're not really moving here, you're kind of pushing your heels towards the wall in front of you, you're pushing the crown of your head towards the wall behind you, and you can feel this light toning of muscular energy throughout your whole body. So this is not a yin pose, this is a yang exercise. And we'll just do this for a couple more breaths here. And then you can go ahead and release a little bit of integration before we move into our final resting pose. So I'm going to suggest reclined windshield wipers. So bend your knees, bring your feet kind of mat width apart, so shoulder width away from each other, and then very gently lower both knees to one side. Bring them back up to center, slowly lower them to the other side. And then you could just continue this movement for a few rounds here. However many you think is required to bring some neutrality back to your spine, some openness back to your hips. And then any other kind of movement that you would like to do, some free form yoga, and then settle into your final resting posture. It can be, I'm going to just practice this traditional shavasana. Notice that this is different than reclined mountain pose. So legs maybe are a little bit farther apart, so feet can flop whatever direction they want to flop. Arms are a little bit wider here, so that maybe the palms can actually rotate up, face the ceiling. So you can make yourself comfortable here. So if there's a lot of strain in the low back, you can put a prop underneath the knees so that they're slightly bent. Maybe a pillow underneath your head, just to minimize neck strain. Again, if you're in a place where it's chilly, then maybe extra clothing or extra blankets. Like I said, I'm recording this during the height of summer, so it's definitely not chilly here. So I don't really need a blanket, but maybe a blanket would feel really nice for you here. Another little details. Little details to make this feel stable and safe and comfortable. It's the whole point to resting pose. Once you've settled in it, then allow everything to just release. The body is released, the mind is released. Maybe release your jaw and your tongue. the inside of your mouth. Release the inside of each cheek. Soften your lips and the skin around your lips. Soften your nose. Soften the skin around each ear. And soften your eyes. Soften the muscles that surround your eye sockets. Soften the space of your head that's in between each eye. Your forehead, your temples, and the crown of your head. Soften down through your upper body, your collarbones, your sternum, your shoulders, shoulder blades. Soften down each arm. Relax your right arm, right palm, right fingers. Left arm, left palm, and left fingers. Soften down through the rest of your torso. Rib cage is relaxed. Abdomen is releasing. Hips are soft. Thighs are soft. Knees are relaxed. Continue to soften down through your shins, calves, ankles, heels, bottoms and the tops of each foot. And then notice the tips of your toes on each foot. Soften there. Release, relax, and surrender your body, mind 100%. Maybe visualize lying underneath a bright, warm sun. At some point, bring yourself back. You can start to make little motions, maybe wiggle fingers, wiggle toes, and then move hands, move feet, move arms, move legs, maybe even gently rock your head from side to side. At some point, gently bend both knees and roll over onto one side. You get there, stay there for a moment. Cultivate deep gratitude for your practice, for the sun, for you, your unique embodiment in this universe. The sun and the universe are ecstatically joyful that you are here. And then when you're ready, slowly bring yourself up to seated. Find a stable seat. When you do, bring your hands together in front of heart center. I'll end this practice with an Om. The inner sunlight in me honors the inner sunlight in you. Namaste.